Hey, howdy, hey folks, it is Mrs. Johnson with the Active Wisdom channel. We are following up on my genetics spiel, and talking about EPDs because I mentioned that to you guys the other day, and it was like, those are things that we use in breeding programs, and they're kind of important and kind of related to genetics. So we're going to talk about that today, in just kind of pulling some resources and kind of scrolling through them and talking very quickly about them. You can find the resources on your own if you want to deep dive. You can Google it and do some deep diving, but we're going to first define EPDs and then talk about how genetics plays a part in that system, because EPDs are a slightly different system than the genetic predictions that we were talking about in the last couple of videos. So, what are EPDs? EPDs are expected progeny differences. Basically, estimates of an animal's genetic merit has a parent, and so the numbers correlate to the how do I put this? The numbers. So these numbers assume that all animals are on a scale of really bad to really good, with average being right in the middle at 0. And your EPDs are accumulation of heritage, like ancestors, children that own animals' success, and in some funky little math ways to kind of identify, is this animal better or worse than average, and assigning them a number based on what specific trait that you're looking for. Is it weight gain? Is it mothering ability? Is it weaning weight? Is it marbling? Is it all these things that you could kind of look at that we in the genetics world don't have a good genetic basis for, but we do have a lot of data on how a bull's babies have done for the last 5 years that he's been breeding cows and making babies. We do have research into what his dad did, and his dad did, and his dad did, and his dad did, just because us as livestock owners keep that information because it's important to us. And so we can, from the phenotypic side, what is presented to the world, phenotypic side, we can kind of start to deduce some of those things with enough data. Some of those like genetic variation data things, which is cool. And we've been doing that for a while. Is there anything else? Oh, differences in environment and management, contemporary groupings, same age and sex raised under same management conditions. Just to make the data more accurate. Calving ease, weaning weight, ribeye area, marbling, cow weight, stability. You can do EPDs for a lot of things. There's differences between breeds, and each one typically has a average. So an EPD above 0 may not mean above average. If you've got a breed average, that's 2 instead of 0. Abstract values, I think this is important. They do not predict individual animal performance. It just means on average, those prodigy will weigh X amount more or less compared to the average. So that specific animal's average is different than their abstract values based on the average for the children of that livestock compared to the overall average. Accuracy between 1 and 0. Heritability, the proportion of variation in a particular trait that can be attributed to inherited genetic factors as opposed to environmental factors. Reproductive traits tend to be low heritability, while weight and carcass traits are more heritable. So, like, just as it said, like, we have evidence to prove that certain things are more genetic based, other things are more environmental based. And this will show you, just kind of go through how to do some data, pick some things, and how to get, EPDs versus average and all the things. That being said, how does genetics and genomic testing play a role in EPDs? Penn State says DNA improves accuracy, which is great. We love to hear it. And I like this chart here because it kind of explains some of the things that I was talking about. So, performance of the animal itself, prodigy data, so what its babies has done. The pedigree is, what came before that animal. Their father, their father, their father. If you're breeding like bulls that make good babies, you're gonna look at, that father's dad and that father's dad and that father's dad to find out if there's a long line of bulls that make good babies. Because in theory, if your dad and your granddad made good babies, so you might too. And then your own performance. Did you do well? And then, are your babies doing well? And genomic testing just adds another layer to that. Because has that last source said with the heritability, there's some things that we can look through the genome for and go, yeah, I don't totally understand these genetics, but I know when. Or I don't totally understand the full list of genetics, but I know when this specific stretch of genes looks like this, that tends to mean more weight gain, tends to mean a bigger animal at weaning. And so we can kind of start piecing things together. Dun dun dun. What are things that we can look at? Calving ease, birth weight, weaning weight, yearling weight, dry matter intake, yearling height, docility, foot angles, pregnancy, calving ease, milk, mature weight, mature height, carcass ribeye, carcass fat. We go into accuracy. So you might have a bull that's got a really high average, but isn't 100% accurate. Like, that doesn't happen all the time. He's got a lot of variability. Or you might have a type of EPD that isn't very accurate. So, carcass weight, carcass marbling might be super accurate, but for certain things, for other things like claw angle, foot angle, those might not be so accurate traits to use EPDs on. And when you look at all of these things together, right, you can kind of start piecing together, okay, this is the performance of this animal, and I can rely on the genetics that it has to actually make that happen. And the more you use an animal, the more data you get on that animal, and the more history you can trace back, the more babies that you can create from this animal, the more data that you have. So the more accurate your EPD is going to be. Which is great. The genetics helps quite a bit because if you can genetically test animals before you get 4 or 5 years down the road and you're halfway through that animal's breeding life, then you can, save yourself the time and go, actually, this animal isn't very accurate at throwing, big, mature beef cattle for market. It's not very good at that. It's sometimes throws really big animals, sometimes throws really small animals, just based on the genetics. And then you can deduce that more. Overall, giving you more information to make informed decisions about your livestock operations, which is really cool. And I think genetics is a fun way to take all this data that we've been coming about and using, and for the last, I think one of these said like 4 or 5 decades now that we've been pulling EPDs, and we're just now getting the genomics into that, which is super cool. So I hope you learned something. I will see you later, and I hope you learned something. Stay safe, all things, and we will talk to you later. Bye.